Greetings. For about a year now, I have been using a BirdDog P4K as one of my primary cameras, and in fact, it's what you're watching me on right now. And I've liked it quite a bit, such that I've actually purchased a second one. And I thought I'd do a little bit of a unboxing and initial setup video for it because there aren't very many on YouTube that I've been able to find. Probably in part because it is an expensive camera. This is a camera that's targeted at professional broadcast, etc., whatever you want to call it, usage. And so there's not really many out there, or at least, like I say, videos. So to start with, the case is got a little flip lid. There's no tape or anything sealing it. Open up, flip, flip, flip. First thing at the top is a little welcome pack. It's got, QR code for the manual online, stuff like that. A little bit of packing. And then what you can see in here, we've got the remote that it comes with on the left. By the way, they do not include a battery for the remote, so you need, I think it's 2 AAs that you need to supply yourself. It comes with some adapter cables for the serial control. So if you're using Visco over serial, there's 2 different serial cables, GPIO cable, etc. And then part of the power cord if you use the included power brick. And then this first top pot comes out. And then you can see you've got the camera in there and then also the power brick. On the power brick side, the camera is powerable from power over Ethernet. And this power brick puts out up to 48 watts. When this camera was first released, they rated it for requiring PoE++, but they've since reduced that to saying only PoE plus because it doesn't actually use more than about 25 watts. And so we'll be able to take a look at that with the power usage reported from my switch. But give me a moment to get this out of here. Now, I will say this camera is a tank. Weighs about 7.5 pounds. So there is some considerable heft to it. It has 2 1/4 20 screws on the bottom for mounting it. I kind of wish it had a 3/8 16 since all of my stands, whether they're these light stands or my C stands, whatever, they all have 3/8 16 threads on the top. It does include a little lens cap. It's forget if it's a 43 or 47 mil lens cap, but it's standard sort of lens cap. On the front, not sure if you can see them, but there's 2 little, let's see if I bring this in, 2 little holes on either side. So it's got microphones built in. For the most part, you probably only want to use them for scratch audio, but whatever, in the pinch. There is also, on the back, you've got audio in and out. Now you can use this for comms, but the other thing you can do is you could feed a time code transmitter into here and have it embed the time code into the video output feed, right? And what I'm going to do, instead of trying to hold this up all the time, I'm going to screw it onto this tripod or camera mount, light stand rather. And get these boxes out of the way so that we can flip it around. So. And zoom in a little more. So like I say, you've got audio in and out. You've got DC in, so if you're using the power supply they provide. A bunch of dip switches that for the most part you won't have to do anything with. This is the main HDMI output if you want to use HDMI. It's also got a sub out. It's got two SDIs, so you can do either 6G SDI or dual 3G SDI, so you can still get the 4K 30 out of it regardless. It's got a Genlock input, which is not currently active in this firmware. They claim that it will be at some point. This little dial here is for setting the video resolution for the HDMI and the SDI outputs. The NDI output over the Ethernet, which is this one here, is configured through the software and is independent of what that dial is set to. And then, like I say, you have the two different serial formats for Visca, USB port for doing upgrades, which we will do, IR select, right? So actually, I'm going to switch this to 2 because I already have the camera that you're watching on set to 1. And let's plug it in. Now, it does a little dance when you plug it in, so I'll turn it back around. Actually, yeah, you know what? That's going to be a lot easier. So we'll plug that in. See, it lights up. And it goes to all the way to the left, and then we'll revert to sort of the default preset 0 location when it finishes booting. So it's coming back around, and I will take off the cap. And you totally missed that because the video was wrong. I apologize. It's nope. Me and my excellent camera skills using the infrared remote. Obviously for real use, you'd probably want to have a proper PTZ joystick. All right, but we'll leave it for the moment at that. And what I'm going to do is I will switch over to desktop capture. And it's plugged into a port that will do PoE++. But as you can see at the moment, it's actually only requested PoE Plus at 30 and is currently using 24 watts. And I'm going to add it over here into OBS. So I'm going to click plus, and I'm going to say BirdDog P4K 02. And actually, before I do that, I need to rename it. So when logging into BirdDog, actually, let me switch back to the desktop capture. When logging into the BirdDog, the default password is BirdDog. Say OK. And we are going to go to network. And down here, I'm going to change this to P4K-02. And you can see it's getting an address via DHCP. I'm going to hit apply. And so now I can come back to the desktop. And of course, OBS doesn't let you capture itself when you're on a different. All right, so I'm going to just say that, and then I'm going to go Studio Monitor. And so I'm going to use the remote from the existing camera, but I'm going to change its ID to transmit on 2. And now I can hit menu. Well, in theory, I can hit menu. That doesn't seem to be... Well, right, yes, duh. I need to switch to... Well, I need to reboot it because I changed the name. So I'm going to say restart device. I'm doing that through the web interface. And it went away. It takes a little bit for it to reload, huh? Well, how about we cheat and we pull the power, plug it back in. And this time you get to see the little dance. All right. So over here we see the P4K02. And you can see what the camera is seeing. And if I use the remote, you can see it do its thing. And the main thing I wanted to do is if I hit the menu button, we can see the on-screen display now. And come down. And in here, we can see the baseband firmware, so that AA009. We want to make sure that that changes when we do the firmware update. And so let's go ahead and do the firmware update. And I'm going to change back to the main camera. So the firmware update, I have already prepared on USB stick, which copied the firmware file to it. And if we flip it around, I'm just going to plug the USB in. And then we're going to power cycle it. And this time what should happen is you notice it does red for a little bit before it goes into its boot sequence. And so at this point, it's had the firmware flashed, right? So I can take the USB back out. We'll log back in over here. And switch over to the second cam. And now hit menu. If we go down to status, we can see that the baseband firmware has updated, and that is correct. So now the next thing we want to do is update the network, the main firmware. So if we go over here and go to System, and go to System Update, and you are still seeing this, yes. Choose the update file, BirdDog. Now this 45206 is fairly recent. You can see it's from January of this year. This was the major update that they did just recently. So like I say, if you go into step 1, there's the bin file that you copy to the USB, and then step 2, here is the firmware file. We're going to say open, and we're going to say update, and it says caution. And so now we let it do its thing. And so now it says it's ready, so we need to boot it again. So I'm going to again pull the power, plug it back in, and we will wait for it to boot back up. And so now if we log back in again, does take a little while to boot up, but the reality is that I've had these things run, or at least my first one run for months at a time without being rebooted and not had any issues with it. And I use it daily. So, you know, they really have been a very stable product for me. So I'll log back in. And so now we can see it is showing the correct firmware. And one of the things that they recommend, especially with going to this 45206, is to do reset, because that basically sets all the settings back to default and make sure that everything's cleared out with the difference in version. And then if you make any changes to the config after that, so we come into AV, and so we got device settings normal, encode is NDI managed, so it figures it out on its own. So like if I change this to 2160p30 and click apply, when you change any of the settings like this, what they say in the manual is to come over here and then do a restart video, because you saw it was still saying 2997 up there, and now it says 30, right? Same thing, like if you were to go from 420 to 422, any of those major settings, you need to do a restart video after you change them, or reboot the camera, right? So again, network, PTZ, so control, so you can tell it to go to various presets. Now that's another thing, when you do the firmware upgrade, it's going to erase all of your camera preset locations, so be aware of that. If you're upgrading camera settings, you can set how fast it moves around. OSD, you can actually turn the OSD on and off from here. So if I switch over to the other camera, you can see that that's turned on and off. And I can also do movement and select stuff through here as well. It's a lot easier to use the remote, obviously. System, you can change that default password, which I'll do later. System update, again, for updating the config. This is, I think you can have it basically download its config off the network automatically. This is showed up in the latest update, and I didn't see any documentation around it. And then NDI network settings, for the most part, you probably don't want to change these. And if you need to change it, you know why you're changing it. So like you have an NDI discovery server, you're going to know you have that and be setting that here. Same thing with the different NDI modes. If you need to change that, you know why you're changing that. And then you have all the AV settings, and right now, you know, basically defaults to full auto because I did the reset on it. I actually usually turn the stabilizer on because I have noticed that when it is panning, it does jitter a bit without the stabilizer turned on. But obviously you can dial all these in the way you want. And let me actually switch to this. You can dial these in the way you want. But they have a cam control software, which I'm not going to go into in this video. That's a much nicer interface. It shows you color wheels and so forth, and lets you modify multiple cameras at the same time and all that fun stuff. And so that's sort of a quick look at getting it out of the box, getting it firmware updated, making sure that it's like been reset and ready to go for now being put into production use. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to leave a comment below, reach out, and I will try to get back to you. Thanks. Cheers.